An old friend wrote to me, warmly after a long silence on both sides. And I started a reply, got 2 lines in, and then saved it as a document instead of sending it, because 2 lines felt like too little for the years between us. I have opened that document more times than I can count and never added a 3rd line. At some point I renamed the file, which is apparently a thing I do in place of writing it. The longer I leave it, the more the leaving becomes the thing I would have to explain, until the reply I owe is no longer about the friend. It is about the silence, which I built one unopened afternoon at a time. You cannot betray a plan you were never able to make. You are a creature that can see further ahead than it can reliably walk. And the gap is where this whole difficulty lives. Still, present bias alone does not explain the pattern that actually torments people. Plenty of dull, distant, effortful things get done on time. What it cannot explain is why the avoidance settles so precisely on the work that matters most, why the friend's letter is harder to finish than a stranger's, why the calling waits while the chores get done twice. For that, you have to look at the feeling the task produces before you touch it. For most of the last century, procrastination was treated as a time management problem, so the advice was about time, schedules, lists, breaking things into steps. If you have ever tried to fix chronic procrastination with a planner, you know how that goes. Over the past 2 decades, researchers including Fuskia Sirois and Timothy Fichel have made a persuasive case that the planner was aimed at the wrong target, and that procrastination is better understood as a problem of managing emotion than of managing time. We do not mainly avoid tasks because we misjudge the hours. We avoid them because of how they make us feel in the moment we turn toward them, and avoidance offers fast relief from that feeling. The mechanism stated once and plainly: you approach the task, it carries some unpleasant charge, and you reach for something that lowers the charge. The relief is immediate, and relief teaches.
So let's say that you've got some stuff going on in your life, and heck, who doesn't have stuff going on in your life? Maybe you're fighting with your significant other. Maybe mom's or dad's health is failing and it's really, really upsetting you. Maybe you've got some financial stuff. You put too much of your savings into Bitcoin, and now that that's crashed, you're stressed out about it, right? And so you go into work, and when you get into work, you got stuff to do, you kind of walk in and you got this big stress ball that subconsciously is hanging over your head. And so you walk in and you sit down, and you know you got 13 phone calls you need to make. And you also know that you've been chickening out, you've been making easy calls, and there's a bunch of CIOs or other people that are higher level that you haven't been calling. And so as you sit down to do it, and you got the stress on your shoulders, your brain it starts to go, wait a minute, well, you want me to make a call to somebody that I'm scared to make? Absolutely not. I'm so stressed out about, can we just watch some cat videos for a minute? And next thing you know, an hour's gone by. And then, of course, what do? You beat yourself up. So the only way that you can break this habit, and that's an important word for you to hear, you're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big difference. Because if it's a habit, I can teach you to use science to break it. You see, all habits have 3 parts. There's a trigger, And in the case of procrastination, the trigger's always stress. Then there's a pattern you repeat, and in the case of procrastination, it is to avoid doing something. And then there's a reward. You get a little stress relief. The only way to break a habit, you guys, is not to deal with the triggers. You're never going to get rid of the stress in your life, but you can 100% change your pattern of avoiding work. So next time that you're in a situation where you feel yourself hesitate, you spent way too much time checking out the highlights from last night's scores, what you're going to do is you're going to go, oh, I must be stressed out about something. Acknowledge the stress. Then go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I want you to count to yourself because I want you to interrupt the habit that's stored here, and I want you to awaken your prefrontal cortex. Then I want you to just work, just for 5 minutes. The reason why I want you to only work for 5 minutes is because your problem isn't working. It's the habit of avoiding. I just need you to start. And here's the other cool thing. We know based on research that if we can get you to start, 80% of you are going to keep going.
Do it enough times, and the sequence wears a groove, while the task, far from shrinking, grows, carrying its original weight plus the weight of having been avoided. I want to be accurate rather than tidy, because emotion regulation is a major part of the story and not the whole of it. The unpleasant charge on a task has many sources and they stack. Some tasks are simply aversive, boring or effortful, or too ambiguous to offer a foothold. Some of it is impulsiveness, a pull toward whatever is more stimulating now. Some is low confidence, the quiet expectation of failure that makes not trying feel safer than trying. Unclear goals do it, and rewards that sit far in the future, and an environment built to be more interesting than the work.
Toss leftover bread to its cubicle at the end of the day, as if we'd never turned ourselves into rope swings, or felt operas slide like syrup down our legs. You, the broken nose, damaged just right. My dear, must I remind you again? Life should be more like a blizzard of paper birds.
Emotion regulation runs through most of these, but it is not a single master key. Seeing procrastination as mood repair explains why the trivial tasks are easy and the meaningful ones radioactive. A meaningless errand carries almost no charge, so there is nothing to flee. But the work bound up with who you are, the project that would show whether the talent you hope you have is real, sits close to a frightening question. This is why so much of what looks like laziness is closer to self-protection. As long as the letter to my friend stays unfinished, it can still become the letter I meant to write. The moment I send it, it is only the one I managed. There is a hidden bargain in lateness, which I have taken more than once without admitting it. Start the night before, and the mediocre result reflects effort, not ability. The chronic procrastinator is often guarding the most delicate thing he owns, an untested belief in his own potential. It also explains why the obvious remedy backfires. Catching yourself avoiding, the instinctive move is to get harder on yourself, as though contempt produced compliance. But shame is an unpleasant feeling, and unpleasant feelings are what the reflex exists to escape. Pile self-loathing onto the task, and it becomes more aversive, not less. You cannot reliably hate yourself into starting. That experiment has been run privately across a great many lives. If any of this seems too modern to be the whole truth, it is worth knowing that the difficulty is very old, and that the first people to take it seriously were not scientists but philosophers arguing about whether the thing you do every day is even possible. When I put off the hard task until tomorrow, I experience it as delaying my own work. When I am really handing it to a version of myself I do not fully identify with, someone not in the room, whose tiredness I will not feel and whose lost evening I will not mourn. Philosophy reached this ledge before the imaging did. Derek Parfit argued that personal identity is not the deep, all-or-nothing fact we assume. What connects you to your future self, on his account, is not an indivisible soul traveling through time, but a web of overlapping psychological connections, memories, intentions, character, and those connections weaken with distance. The you of 30 years from now is related to the present you somewhat as a descendant to an ancestor, continuous but not simply identical. Parfit himself drew out consequences for how we regard our own future well-being, extending it to procrastination, treating imprudence toward your later self as a small injustice toward another person is a step this essay is taking, not a claim. But it is a step his view invites, and it changes the texture of the ordinary decision to defer. You are not only being disorganized, you may be treating a real person, the one who lives in the consequences, as if his interests weighed less because he is not here to object. There is a distortion running the other way, and this one you will recognize. If the future self is a stranger, he is a curiously idealized one. Ask almost anyone about tomorrow and listen to who shows up. Someone rested, focused, unbothered by the phone, holding the long clean hours today never contained. Tomorrow me is more disciplined than I have managed to be on any single day of my life, and I keep giving him work on the strength of a reputation he has not earned. Researchers call the scheduling half of this the planning fallacy, our tendency to underestimate how long things take, even after being wrong the same way before. Beneath the misjudged hours is a misjudged person, and the two lock into an engine for delay. Today is excused because tomorrow is capable, and tomorrow on arrival becomes another today in need of excusing. There is at least a direction out. What seems to matter is making the future self more vivid and more continuous with the present one. In Hirschfield's work, people shown age-progressed images of their own faces or otherwise prompted to picture their later selves concretely made somewhat more patient choices afterward. I would not oversell the effect. But the point holds, the bond between you and the person you're becoming behaves less like a fixed fact than like a relationship, one that can be neglected or tended. The letter I owe my friend is, among other things, a debt I keep transferring to a version of me who will supposedly be better at hard conversations. He never is. He is just me, later, holding the same two lines. The postponed hours have to go somewhere, and Urban gave the place they go its right name, the dark playground. It is where leisure happens at the hours when leisure has not been earned. From the outside, it is indistinguishable from rest. Watching something, reading something, tidying something that did not need you, but anyone who has spent an afternoon there knows the difference in their body. Real leisure is light, because the time belongs to you. The dark playground offers the same activities stripped of permission, and the result fails even as pleasure. The show plays and does not land, because part of your attention keeps signaling the undone thing. What separates this from ordinary distraction is a doubling of awareness. The genuinely distracted person has forgotten the task. The procrastinator remembers it continuously, with a clarity he can bring to almost nothing else, while doing everything except it. He watches himself avoid and narrates the avoidance as it happens, at once the one wasting the hours and the one keeping grim count. You get the uselessness of rest and the depletion of work together, all the fatigue of labor and none of the labor, which is why a day of doing nothing can leave a person wrung out. The damage runs in a direction people miss. The dark playground does not only spoil work, it slowly ruins rest. Real rest needs a boundary, some sense of a thing set down, and for the chronic avoider, those boundaries dissolve. Work bleeds into evenings it never fills. Weekends are spent half-braced for tasks that never get touched, and what is left is a permanent middle state, never quite working and never quite free. People in it sometimes tell me they miss the feeling of a finished day. One thing about this terrain really is new. The exits from discomfort used to be whatever a person could improvise. Now the exit is a device built by very capable people whose business depends on capturing wandering attention and holding it, with feeds designed to have no natural stopping point and recommendations that learn which flavor of novelty settles your particular restlessness. This is not a conspiracy, just a market, and your fleeing attention is the product.
Mystery ride. I'm so dizzy, don't know what hit me, but I'll be alright. My head's under water and I'm breathing fire. You're crazy and I'm out of my mind. 'Cause all of me loves all of you. Of your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. Give your all to me. Give my all to you. You're my end and my beginning. Even when I lose, I'm winning. 'Cause I give you all of me. And I give you all of me. Oh, yeah.
But the contest is less fair than it used to be. The struggle is old, the equipment on the other side of it is not, and that is worth factoring in before you decide the whole problem is your defective willpower. The deadline-driven procrastinator does have one consolation. His system, ugly as it is, tends to work. The panic arrives, the paper gets written, the filing happens at the last hour. The costs are real, in quality and nerves, but the structure of his life holds because the world keeps handing him emergencies that force his hand. The unsettling question is what becomes of a person when the world stops, when the thing being postponed has no due date at all. The two procrastinations. Everything so far, the all-nighters and last-minute saves, belongs to the visible kind of procrastination, the kind that happens inside structures. School, work, taxes, courts, institutions that wrap a task in a deadline, and a deadline eventually produces enough alarm to override the urge to flee. This kind is loud and self-limiting. However badly you suffer inside it, the structure catches you before you fall too far, and the damage stays contained to frayed nerves and work that could have been better. The other kind has no structure beneath it, and it lives in exactly the places institutions do not reach. The creative work you would do if you ever felt ready, which no one assigns and no one calls to ask about. The venture that needs 100 self-generated steps before the world notices you exist. The health that erodes by degrees, each skipped appointment individually harmless, the reckoning assembling in silence over years. The friendship gone quiet, where the not writing back has lasted long enough that the delay itself is now the thing to be explained, the conversation a marriage needs. The parent you intend in some formless permanent way to make peace with, none of it is due on any date. All of it is due in the largest sense a thing can be due. The cruelty is in the physics. With a deadline, delay raises the pressure. The closer the date, the louder the alarm, until acting becomes unavoidable. Without one, delay lowers the pressure. Each month, the unwritten book slides further into someday, which is not a time, but a kind of storage, a place you put things you mean to retrieve and mostly do not. The postponed dream does not nag louder as it ages. It nags softer until it stops presenting itself as a plan and becomes a private fact about you, mentioned with a small, self-deprecating laugh that asks the listener not to press. Because no crisis announces the loss never registers as an event. Nothing happens year after year, and nothing happening is exactly the outcome no alarm is built to catch. When Urban first wrote about all this in his comic register, thousands of letters came back, and they were not comic. They came from nurses and engineers and students and retirees, and under the variety ran one recurring confession, the feeling of having become a spectator in one's own life. I have never found a better phrase for where the deadline-less kind eventually leads. The spectator still shows up and functions and meets every obligation that carries a date. What he has lost is authorship, the sense that his life goes where it goes because he is choosing it rather than being carried, and the grief is specific. It is not the grief of chasing something and falling short, which at least comes with a story and sometimes with dignity. It is the grief of a chase that never started, with no single day on which the not starting turned permanent. There is a hard philosophical edge here that did me good even as it stung. We define ourselves by our intentions. I'm a writer who has not written the thing yet, a friend who is going to reply properly, a person who fully intends. The postponer lives inside a self assembled largely out of futures. Against that runs an old and unsentimental line of thought from Aristotle's insistence that virtue exists in activity rather than in mere capacity, to the existentialist claim that a person is the sum of what they do, with no hidden credit for the beautiful things left unattempted. I do not fully live inside that view, and I am not sure a merciful person can. But I keep it where I can see it, because the spectator's whole trance depends on believing the real performance has not begun. It has. This is it, going on now, while I keep the good version safe by never producing it. What makes the deadlineless kind so resistant is that it is missing the one ingredient that has ever reliably moved a procrastinator, an approaching consequence. So, the fair question is whether any real consequence exists for these things at all. There is one. It is the same for every item on the list, and every serious tradition of human wisdom has organized itself, in part, around the difficult work of keeping it in view. The final deadline. 2,000 years ago, in a short and bracing essay to a friend, Seneca argued that our complaint about life being short is mostly false. Life is long enough for great things if it were actually used. The trouble is not the quantity of our time, but the waste of it. His portraits of the people who waste it have not aged. The man so consumed by busyness, he is never quite doing anything, and the man perpetually preparing to live who never gets around to living. We guard our money and our property closely, and let anyone at all help themselves to our days, as though days were the thing we held in endless supply. What Seneca understood is that the deadline-less tasks do have a deadline. There is exactly one, the same for all of them, which is the end of your life. It fails to move us the way a term paper moves us because its date is unknown, and an unknown date reads to the mind as a distant one. Death sits in our planning, much as the future self sits in it, an abstraction we can describe and do not feel. With one difference, there is no panic phase. For most people, the alarm does not sound until something forces it, an illness, a loss, a birthday that lands wrong, which is why those who sit with the dying tend to hear the same regrets, and why the regrets are so rarely about things done and so often about things deferred until the deferring ran out. The old traditions built strange practices around this, and they read differently once you understand their purpose. The skull kept on a scholar's desk. Grave inscriptions addressed to the passerby. What you are, I once was. Marcus Aurelius, running an empire from a military camp, reminding himself in a private notebook that a person could leave life at any moment and should let that inform how he acts now. To modernize, this looks morbid. Its function was the opposite. It made the far thing near enough to matter. They could not lengthen life, so they worked on the illusion of its endlessness and reported finding on the other side not dread, but a sharpened attention, and under it a kind of gratitude. Here I have to put a warning on the medicine, because I have taken too much of it and I know how the overdose goes. Awareness of mortality has a dose curve. Held lightly, it restores proportion. Pressed too hard, it stops restoring anything and starts feeding the very anxiety that procrastination exists to escape. You can turn the fact of death into another whip. It helps to separate the useful thing from its counterfeits. There is meaningful urgency, which quietly raises the stakes of a real choice. There is panic, which floods the system and sends it looking for an exit. There is shame, which converts every idle hour into a small verdict. And there is compulsive optimization, the belief that every hour must be made productive or it is lost. Only the first helps. The others wear urgency's clothes and do its opposite. This means something the productive person forgets. A life well used is not a life of maximized output. It includes rest that is actually restful, play that answers to nothing, time given to people for no reason but their company, and stretches of apparent idleness in which attention wanders and things quietly recombine. Mortality does not ask you to stop resting. It asks that you stop mistaking avoidance for rest and spend the finite thing on what you would actually choose, which very much includes doing nothing on purpose. Self-compassion is associated with more willingness to take responsibility for failures, less crippling fear of them, and more persistence after them, apparently because a person not facing a verdict can afford to look directly at what went wrong. The drill sergeant produces the appearance of high standards and the reality of avoidance because the safest way to escape his judgment is to never be evaluated, and the surest way to never be evaluated is to never finish, or better, never start. Self-kindness treated this way is not indulgence. It is closer to what makes it bearable to sit down in front of the frightening task, be bad at it for an hour, and come back the next day anyway. The word I keep circling is grace, and I use it deliberately because the psychologists have arrived by measurement at something the older religious traditions reached by another road, and the old word carries a meaning the clinical language drops. Grace, in the traditions that shape the term, is favor that comes before deserving, acceptance extended ahead of the work rather than paid afterward as wages. Set that against the procrastinator's inner economy, which runs on the reverse. Rest must be earned, worth must be proven, today's standing depends on today's output. Grace breaks the exchange at its root. If your worth is settled before the work rather than by it, the work stops being a trial with you in the dock. It becomes only work, done well or badly, and failure returns to its true size, the size of an event and not of a self. Augustine, who gave us not yet, located his own release here, in the discovery that he did not have to perfect himself before he was allowed to begin. Whatever you believe about the source of such acceptance, its structure is available to you tonight. Worth first, then work. Every writer who has let themselves produce a bad first draft has borrowed it. Let me be exact about what this is not, because it gets mistaken for lowering the bar. Standards are not the enemy. Most chronic procrastinators believe their problem is too little harshness when they are drowning in it. Their inner life is a courtroom in permanent session, and the courtroom is the problem because a mind on trial flees, and the fleeing is the procrastination. Adjourn the court and the mind can afford to stay in the room. What remains once the shame is cleared is the honest residue, a task still difficult and a day still finite. Grace walks you to the start without the extra weight. It does not do the work. For the work there is a craft, unglamorous and learnable, and it is the last thing I have to offer. Start with the least glamorous working assumption in the whole area, which took me an embarrassingly long time to trust. For a lot of tasks, motivation follows action at least as often as it precedes it. The procrastinator waits to feel ready as though readiness were a bus that would arrive, when often it is manufactured by the doing and cannot be summoned before it. This is not a law. There are days where no amount of starting produces momentum, but the dread of a task tends to concentrate at its threshold and ease once you are inside, which means a fair amount of the suffering goes to fleeing a feeling that was going to fade anyway. You do not have to win the whole day. You mostly have to get through the doorway. So the craft of beginning is largely the craft of shrinking the first step until it is smaller than the fear around it. Not write the book, but open the document and write one poor sentence. Not repair the friendship, but add the third line to the letter. I know how minor this sounds. It targets the mechanism from earlier. A step small enough carries little charge and gives the reflex nothing to flee. There is a useful refinement here from the psychologist Peter Gollwitzer, who has shown across many studies that vague intentions underperform specific ones tied to a cue. Deciding I will work on it later leaves the decision to be remade in a weak moment. I will open the file settles it in advance and attaches it to something concrete. These implementation intentions are not magic, and the effect varies by person and task, but on average they help more than resolve alone, because they remove one of the places willpower usually loses. The same logic runs outward to the room the action happens in, and accepting this was a genuine humbling. In any repeated contest between willpower and environment, bet on the environment. People who look disciplined are frequently not resisting more temptation than you. They have arranged to encounter less of it. Putting the phone in another room is not a slogan, but a recognition that a device engineered to be pulled will, within reach, eventually get pulled, and each pull charges a toll of return, because scattered attention gathers slowly. Add a few steps between yourself and the exits. Remove the steps between yourself and the work. Leave the document open the night before. Choose tomorrow's first sentence tonight. After everything's said about the distance between the present self and the future one. These are also messages from one to the other. The near you doing the far you a quiet favor. For the deadlineless things, one more piece is close to necessary because they lack the built-in consequence that carries everything else. Where no deadline exists, you often have to build one, and the sturdiest material is other people. A private deadline only you can see is a promise with no enforcement, and the mind knows it. Tell someone the pages are coming Friday, and the task acquires a due date in the one currency the near-term mind respects: social reality. This is the logic of the oldest pre-commitment story we have, Odysseus bound to the mast because he did not trust the self who would hear the sirens, and its modern forms are ordinary. The writing partner expecting pages, the class already paid for, the friend told to ask about it next week. Structure of this kind is not the opposite of freedom. For the postponed dream, it is frequently the only door freedom ever walks through. None of this is a cure, and it would be dishonest to sell it as one. There is a version of this problem that does not yield to smaller steps and better environments because it is entangled with something larger. Persistent, severe procrastination can travel with depression, with anxiety, with ADHD, with burnout, with the aftermath of trauma, with plain chronic exhaustion, and those are not moral failures to be outwilled. I am not going to diagnose you from here, and most everyday procrastination is not any of these. But if the strategies keep sliding off, if the difficulty is heavy and constant and reaches into everything, that is worth taking to someone qualified rather than treating as further proof of your character. Some of what looks like avoidance is a condition asking to be seen. And when you lapse, which you will, the last skill keeps the lapse from spreading. Coming back quickly, procrastinators are catastrophists about slips. One lost morning becomes a lost day. The lost day proves the week ruined. The ruined week enters the permanent case against the self. The practiced beginner treats a slip more like weather. It happened, it means little, and the next small step is still where it was. Miss once, try not to miss twice, and hold even that loosely. as a kindness rather than a rule. All of it together, the smaller step, the queue, the arranged room, the borrowed deadline, the fast return, adds up to a single change of aim. You stop trying to become a person who does not struggle and start building a life in which the struggle loses often enough anyway. He gets outmaneuvered most days by furniture and by friends, and that turns out to be enough, because the work never needed you transformed. It needed you to show up while imperfect. What I can actually offer you. I am not going to tie this off neatly because the subject does not allow it and you would not trust it if I did. Followed down, procrastination is not really a discipline problem. It is a present-heavy motivational system carrying out plans made by a version of you it barely recognizes, a flinch away from feelings that were often about to pass, and a habit of self-judgment that manufactures the avoidance it condemns. Underneath runs the slow, quiet spending of the only finite thing you have. The trouble was never a single wasted night. It is the trance in which such nights accumulate, and the trance does not break through force. When it breaks through small acts of attention, taken gently, one at a time. Somewhere in your life there is a deadlineless thing, and you do not need me to name it, because it named itself while you were reading, probably more than once. No institution is going to ask you for it. No alarm is going to sound. It is guarded by a feeling, and the feeling is standing between you and a judgment, and the judgment is almost certainly harsher than the truth. Here is the little I actually believe about that thing, said plainly. It does not require you to be ready, because readiness tends to arrive after the beginning and not before it. Your best is not required either. The first version is allowed to be poor, and giving yourself that permission is not laziness, but the grace that makes starting possible at all. Hey. Nor does it need you transformed into someone else first. It asks for a step small enough that the fear cannot get a grip on it, taken at a time you have already chosen, in a room you have already made easier, with one person, if you can manage it, expecting to hear how it went. And when you fall away from it, it asks you back without the punishment, because you know now what the punishment feeds. The weeks are genuinely finite, and I will not pretend otherwise, but I am not handing you that as a threat, and I would ask you not to carry it as one. Held rightly, it is the reason any of this matters at all. A creature with unlimited time could postpone forever at no cost, and nothing it did could carry weight, because everything could always be done later by some other version of itself. You are not that creature, and the limit is not your enemy. It is what makes showing up for a single ordinary hour a real act rather than a rehearsal. Spend some of those hours resting, and some of them with people, and some of them doing nothing you could defend to a stranger. Just stop spending so many of them fleeing the few things you would actually choose if the fear would quiet down. As for the letter, it is still 2 lines long, though it has a better file name now. Not a good line, just a true one, sent before the part of me that wants it perfect wakes up and asks for more time. You will finish reading this, and the old voice will be there waiting. It will tell you this was all true and can begin tomorrow. It has said exactly that every day for years, in the same reasonable tone, and it is the one voice in your head that has never once kept its word. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to win. Just open the file while it's still talking.
What is life? It's a puzzle. No one to guide us. No one to solve the puzzle. Goalposts constantly moving. Hilltop far. No one here. A missing piece. An uncomfortable scene. A game that can't be won. night and day, repeating tales, competing ideals. Another compromise. But then, you look at someone else, and they are just as puzzled, just as confused, just in a different way. Then, it doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit. It doesn't matter if it's uncomfortable. And slowly, it all comes together.
Message read stop. Probe stop. My train.